In the grim darkness of the far future, there is only war. But behind every battle, every victory, and every sacrifice stands one being above all others, the Emperor of mankind, the immortal ruler of the Imperium, the Savior, the Conqueror, and the God of humanity. Yet despite 10,000 years of worship, one question still echoes across the galaxy. What truly happened to the Emperor of mankind? He was the greatest of all humans, unmatched in intellect, power, and will. He united a shattered Earth, forged the Imperium, and led the Great Crusade to bring every human world under one banner. But then came betrayal, the Horus heresy, when his most beloved son turned against him. Their final battle reshaped the fate of the galaxy. The Emperor triumphed, but at a terrible cost. His mortal body was destroyed, his spirit trapped between life and death. Now he sits upon the golden throne, a machine that sustains his existence and powers the Astronomicon, the psychic light that guides the ships of mankind. But this leads us to greater questions. How powerful was the Emperor truly? Was he a god among men, or something even beyond that? What happens when the Emperor of mankind finally dies, when the light of the Imperium fades and chaos surges across the stars? And perhaps the most haunting of all, what if the Emperor were to return? What if the master of mankind rose again, not as a corpse bound to machinery, but as a living god reclaiming his throne? In this video, we will explore these questions, his life, his fall, and the unimaginable possibilities of his return. From the power he once wielded to the legends that still surround him, we'll uncover the truth behind the most mysterious figure in the Warhammer 40,000 universe. Because if the Emperor returns, everything changes. The Imperium could be reborn or destroyed in his wrath. The Primarchs might rise again. The forces of chaos could tremble, and humanity might finally see the dawn of a new golden age, or its final, burning end. Before we begin, make sure to subscribe to the channel and leave a like to support the journey. This is not just another story, it's the legend that defines all of Warhammer. So sit back, listen closely, and prepare to witness the tale of the Emperor of mankind, the immortal, the divine, and the eternal, ruler of humanity.
So, let's start by, what happened to the Emperor of mankind? Before the galaxy drowned in endless war, before the Imperium became a monument to fanaticism and decay, there was a man, or something more than a man, who sought to save humanity from its own destruction. He was the Emperor of mankind, a being of unfathomable power and purpose. His existence stretched back into the shadows of ancient Terra, hidden from history, guiding humanity's evolution in secret. He watched civilizations rise and fall, steering the species toward unity and survival, preparing for the day he would finally reveal himself to lead them into the stars. That moment came in the 30th millennium. The Emperor emerged from obscurity, wielding science, reason, and psychic mastery beyond comprehension. He conquered Terra, uniting its warring nations under one banner, his own. Then, through unmatched genius and will, he created the Primarchs, 20 demigod-like sons, each crafted from his genetic essence. These sons became generals, philosophers, and symbols of his dream, to forge a galaxy-spanning empire of humanity, guided by knowledge and free from the corruption of the warp. The Great Crusade began. Humanity expanded across the stars, liberating or conquering countless worlds. Billions joined the Imperium's ranks. For a time, it seemed the Emperor's vision was unstoppable. The galaxy, fractured and chaotic, began to take shape under his iron hand. Each Primarch led his Space Marine legions in glorious conquest. Faith in the Emperor's dream burned bright across the void. But where light shines, shadow always follows. The powers of chaos, the dark gods of the warp, watched humanity's rise with envy and hatred. They sought to corrupt what the Emperor had built, to twist his creations into weapons of ruin. And they succeeded. His most beloved son, Horus Lupercal, War Master of the Imperium, fell to chaos. Seduced by lies, pride, and whispers from the warp, Horus turned against his father, igniting the greatest betrayal in human history. The Horus heresy had begun, a galactic civil war that tore the Imperium apart. Brother fought brother, legion against legion. Planets burned and entire systems were annihilated. The Emperor's dream of unity shattered as his sons became instruments of destruction. The heresy consumed the stars, culminating in the Siege of Terra, the final desperate stand of loyal humanity. The skies of Terra burned with the fire of orbital bombardments. Titan-clad engines of war clashed across the ruined plains, while traitor legions laid siege to the imperial palace. For weeks, the Loyalists held on, their faith in the Emperor unbroken. Then Horus lowered the shields of his flagship, daring his father to face him one last time. The Emperor accepted. In that final confrontation aboard the Vengeful Spirit, the Emperor and his fallen son met in battle. Their duel was not merely physical, but spiritual, a clash of gods and ideals. Horus, empowered by the Chaos Gods, unleashed unimaginable power. The Emperor, still mortal in form, fought with all his might, yet he even hesitated. In that single heartbeat of compassion, that lingering love for the son he once cherished, Horus struck a mortal blow. Yet in his final act of will, the Emperor unleashed his full divine power. The warp itself trembled. With a burst of psychic fury that defied comprehension, he obliterated Horus, body and soul, from existence. The War Master was erased, utterly annihilated, even in the eyes of the gods who had blessed him. But the victory was hollow. The Emperor's mortal form was ruined beyond repair. The loyal Primarchs carried his shattered body back to Terra. Rogel Dorn found him barely alive, his flesh torn, his light dimming. With desperate faith, they placed him upon the Golden Throne, a life support machine never meant for such a purpose. Its mechanisms were hastily repurposed to sustain what little life remained within him. And so the Emperor did not die, but neither did he live. His body became a ruin, a husk of divine flesh. His mind drifted between worlds, bound in eternal agony. Yet even in that state, his will endured. Through his psychic might, he held back the warp's tides, shielding humanity from utter annihilation. His spirit continued to burn within the Imperium, waging an invisible, endless war against chaos itself. In the millennia that followed, the Emperor became legend. The man who once rejected religion was now worshipped as a god. The ecclesiarchy rose, preaching his divinity to billions. The Imperium became a theocracy, bound not by reason or progress, but by faith and fear. To the people of the 41st millennium, he is the God Emperor, the eternal ruler whose light guides all of mankind. Every day, thousands of psychers are sacrificed to sustain his life. Their souls feed the Golden Throne, keeping his psychic beacon, the Astronomicon, burning across the galaxy. Without it, humanity's fleets would be lost in the warp, stranded between stars, and civilization would collapse. His existence is both salvation and damnation, a symbol of endurance and of decay. The irony is cruel. The emperor who sought to build an empire of logic and unity has become the cornerstone of superstition and stagnation. His dream of enlightenment has been buried under the weight of bureaucracy, dogma, and endless war. His empire endures, vast, unyielding, but blind to the very truth he once fought for. Still, some whisper that he has not truly gone, that deep within the golden throne, his mind remains aware, watching, waiting, that one day he may rise again, reborn, restored, and ready to lead humanity once more. Others believe his essence is fading, his light dimming with every passing century. If he truly dies, the Astronomicon will extinguish, and the Imperium will be plunged into darkness. 10,000 years of worship, sacrifice, and blood, all resting on a corpse that refuses to die. The Emperor's throne has become both his tomb and his fortress. His followers kneel before his silence, interpreting his absence as divine will. But whether he dreams, suffers, or silently judges, none can say. What happened to the Emperor of mankind? He saved humanity, and in doing so, doomed himself to an eternity of torment. His body rots, his empire decays, and his people wage wars in his name that he would never have wanted. Yet even in ruin, his will endures, a dying God holding back the night, so that humanity might see one more dawn.
And now let's see how strong is the God Emperor of mankind. To understand the power of the Emperor of mankind is to confront something beyond reason, a force that defies science, faith, and imagination alike. The Emperor is not merely powerful. He is the very definition of psychic supremacy, the greatest human to ever exist, and perhaps the most formidable being the galaxy has ever known. His strength is not measured in muscle or weaponry, but in his sheer will, a mind capable of shaping reality itself. Before he was wounded and confined to the Golden Throne, the Emperor's power existed on a scale few could comprehend. He was a perpetual, an immortal being, born in the earliest days of human history, crafted from the combined souls of ancient shamans who sacrificed themselves to create a single, eternal guardian for humanity. Across millennia, he watched civilizations rise and crumble, always hidden, always guiding. His psychic might was so vast that he could walk unseen among mortals, cloak entire worlds from the warp, and manipulate the flow of fate itself. When the Emperor finally revealed himself during the unification wars on Terra, his power shook the world. Entire armies bowed before his presence without words. He crushed techno-barbarian warlords, psychic tyrants, and mutants with a thought. He could burn out a man's mind simply by looking at him. Some claimed his eyes glowed with the light of a star, not metaphor, but truth. His mere presence calmed storms, silenced battlefields, and radiated such psychic energy that untrained psychers would collapse in awe or terror. But physical might was only one aspect of his strength. The Emperor's intellect was godlike. He understood science, technology, and metaphysics on a level no mortal could approach.
He designed the genetic code of the Primarchs, crafting living demigods from his own essence. He created the Space Marines, the Custodes, the mechanisms of the warp drive, and even the Astronomicon itself, the psychic beacon that allows humanity to navigate the stars. He could see the currents of the warp, predict the flow of time, and foresee destinies stretching across millennia. To lesser beings, he appeared omniscient. To the Chaos gods, he was a rival. During the Great Crusade, the Emperor's power was unmatched on the battlefield. He wielded his sword, the blade of the Emperor, with speed and precision that defied mortal limits. He could strike faster than thought, shatter tanks with his bare hands, and annihilate armies single-handedly. His psychic powers eclipsed those of the most powerful psychers in the galaxy. He could immolate titans with psychic fire, banish daemons with a word, and seal rifts in the warp by sheer force of will. Entire fleets trembled in his wake. Even the most powerful alien species viewed him as something outside the natural order, a god wearing the flesh of a man. To the Chaos gods, the Emperor was a paradox, a being of the Imperium who could challenge them on their own turf. He rejected their offers of power, denied their worship, and stood as the greatest threat to their existence. In the warp, his psychic form was radiant, a blazing sun of golden light that could scour away corruption and drive back even the mightiest daemons. During the Horus heresy, when Horus, empowered by all four Chaos gods, faced him, the Emperor matched that apocalyptic strength blow for blow. It took the combined power of Chaos itself to bring him to the brink, and even then he triumphed, erasing Horus from existence and shaking the Imperium to its core. That act alone revealed the true scale of his might. The Emperor's psychic blast didn't simply kill Horus, it unmade him. His soul was obliterated so completely that even the dark gods could not resurrect their champion. This level of power places the Emperor beyond any mortal frame of reference. He could destroy a demigod with a thought, manipulate time, and project his will across light years. He was, quite literally, the human race's answer to the gods of chaos. And even now, after 10,000 years of death in life, his power endures. Confined to the golden throne, his body decays, but his mind burns brighter than any star. Through sheer psychic force, he maintains the Astronomicon, a beacon that stretches across the galaxy, guiding billions of ships through the horrors of the warp. He protects humanity from demonic invasion every single moment. To do this, he must be constantly active in the Imperium, locking his will against the tide of chaos. It is an endless psychic war, and he has fought it without rest for 10 millennia. Every day, the Emperor consumes the souls of thousands of psychers sacrificed in his name. Their energy fuels his eternal struggle, keeping his beacon lit and the warp at bay. Even half dead, the Emperor's mind holds more power than every living psycher in the Imperium combined. If he were ever to awaken fully, the galaxy itself might tremble. The very fabric of reality could shift under his will. To understand how strong he truly is, imagine this. Without the Emperor's existence, chaos would have long consumed humanity. Demons would pour into the Imperium unchecked, and every human world would fall into madness. It is only his will that holds back the storm, a single mind maintaining the balance between survival and annihilation. The Imperium calls him a god because in every way that matters, he is one. But the Emperor's strength also carries tragedy. Power of that scale isolates completely. He cannot be touched, understood, or even questioned. His wisdom is absolute, yet his will has become a doctrine of faith enforced by generations who have long forgotten his true purpose. The very empire he built to liberate humanity now enslaves it, driven by blind devotion to the power he never wanted worshipped. Still, his legend persists, not as the scientist, philosopher, or ruler he once was, but as the divine protector who guards the species from the abyss. Even now, his psychic essence echoes across the warp. Some claim to hear his voice in their dreams. Others believe he manifests visions to his chosen, guiding the faithful or warning them of dangers to come. Whether these miracles are real or delusions born of desperation, no one can say for certain, but across 10,000 years, his influence remains absolute. So how strong is the Emperor of mankind? Strong enough to conquer a galaxy, strong enough to slay a god, strong enough to hold back hell itself, alone. And even as his body rots upon the golden throne, his mind burns eternal. The stars may fade, empires may crumble, but the Emperor's light endures, defying death, defying chaos, defying the end of all things.
Did you ever ask yourself, what happens when the Emperor of mankind dies? For 10,000 years, the Emperor of mankind has sat immobile upon the golden throne, his body a decaying husk sustained by ancient machinery and the sacrifice of 1,000 souls each day. To the Imperium, he is a god, the light that guides humanity through the warp, the architect of civilization, and the eternal guardian of mankind's soul. Yet beneath the faith and the fire lies a truth that terrifies even the most devoted servants of the Imperium. The Emperor is dying. His body rots, his will flickers, and the machinery that sustains him falters with every passing century. The question that echoes through the galaxy is not if he will die, but when, and what will follow in the moment his light finally fades. If the Emperor dies, the Astronomicon, the psychic beacon that allows ships to navigate the warp, will collapse. Billions of vessels traveling between stars would be lost within seconds, swallowed by the tides of madness and daemons that churn in that hellish dimension. The Imperium's worlds, scattered across 1,000,000 systems, would be cut off from one another, unable to communicate, trade, or send aid. Within weeks, starvation and anarchy would begin to spread. Hive worlds would devour themselves in desperation. Forge worlds would go silent. The Imperium of man would fracture, its vast machinery of faith and bureaucracy grinding to a halt. Across the warp, the death of the Emperor would echo like a cataclysm. His immense psychic presence, which holds back the endless tide of chaos, would vanish, and in that absence, the demonic gods of the warp would surge forward. Terra itself would become the first target. Without his will to hold the Imperium at bay, the Eye of Terror would widen, and the warp would bleed into reality. Demonic legions unleashed and unrestrained would pour into the galaxy. The Emperor's body, revered as a god's relic, might even become the very gate through which chaos consumes humanity. On Terra, the Adeptus Custodes would fight to the last. The Imperial Palace, once a monument of divine authority, would become a fortress of desperation. The Ecclesiarchy would declare the Emperor's death a test of faith, while the Inquisition would tear itself apart in conflicting dogmas. Some claiming his death marks the end of all things, others believing it signals his rebirth. Civil war would ignite not just across planets, but within every institution of imperial power. For 10,000 years, every law, every prayer, every breath has revolved around one being.
Without him, meaning itself might collapse. Yet there are those who whisper that death would not be the end, that in dying the emperor would ascend, not as a corpse god bound to a throne, but as a true divine entity, reborn as the god of humanity. In this vision, his spirit would ignite across the warp like a new sun, purging daemons, reshaping reality, and uniting the fractured souls of mankind. Billions would feel his return not through command or edict, but through revelation, a psychic dawn sweeping across the galaxy. In this future, the Emperor is no longer confined to Terra. He is everywhere, within every prayer, every act of faith, every spark of courage. His victory would be the transcendence of death itself. But such ascension is not guaranteed. If the Emperor's death comes too suddenly, without preparation or unity among his servants, chaos would consume his soul before it could ascend. Slanesh, Tsinch, Nurgle, and Khorne, the four great powers of damnation, have awaited this moment since his fall. The Emperor's psychic energy would be a feast beyond imagining, a divine flame that could elevate one of them to absolute dominion over the warp. The result would not be a new age of light, but the end of all reality, devoured by a single monstrous god. Even so, humanity has always endured. The Imperium's strength lies not only in its faith in the Emperor, but in its will to survive the impossible. Should he fall, the galaxy would burn. But from the ashes, perhaps something new could emerge. Perhaps a reborn emperor, not as the distant god of bureaucracy and dogma, but as the unifying spirit of mankind's potential. Or perhaps humanity, unshackled from divine rule, would finally learn to stand on its own, forging a future without gods, guided only by the memory of the one who gave everything to save them. In the end, the death of the Emperor is both an ending and a beginning. It is the collapse of a 10-millennial empire and the birth of whatever comes after. His sacrifice built humanity's last empire. His death may determine its next. Whether he rises as a god of light or falls as the final victim of the warp, one truth remains unchanged. The Emperor is humanity's reflection. Its greatness, its cruelty, its resilience, and its endless hunger for survival. And perhaps that is his true immortality, not in the body that decays upon the throne, but in the unyielding will of the species that refuses to die, even when its God does. But what if the Emperor of mankind returned? For 10,000 years the Imperium of man has endured under the light of a god who neither speaks nor moves. The Emperor of mankind, the master of humanity, the savior of the dark age, the silent god of the 41st millennium, lies upon the golden throne, a corpse sustained by technology and faith. His spirit burns eternally in agony, guiding ships through the warp, shielding humanity from chaos, and serving as the beacon of a faith he never intended. But what if that silence were broken? What if, after millennia of sacrifice and suffering, the Emperor rose from his throne once more? The galaxy would tremble. Across 1,000,000 worlds, countless billions would fall to their knees as the Astronomicon flared with impossible brilliance. The faithful would scream in ecstasy and terror as the God Emperor's light became unbearable, searing through the warp like the dawn of creation. Pilgrims would collapse in tears. Priests would cry out, their prayers answered by the voice of the divine itself. And for the first time in 10,000 years, the Emperor would see his empire, not as legend or memory, but as reality. What he would behold is a nightmare of devotion and decay. His Imperium, once envisioned as a secular utopia of reason and unity, has become a twisted theocracy. Billions live and die in his name, ignorant and afraid, worshipping him as a god, when once he forbade such faith. The galaxy burns with endless wars fought in his honor. The Adeptus Mechanicus worship machines as divine. The ecclesiarchy turns belief into weaponized obedience. The High Lords of Terra rule through bureaucracy and fear. The Emperor's dream has been consumed by the very fanaticism he sought to destroy. His return would not be peaceful. It would be revelation and judgment. Across the Imperium, holy wars would ignite overnight. The ecclesiarchy, whose authority rests upon interpreting his silence, would face annihilation as the Emperor himself speaks. The Inquisition, guardians of his truth, would splinter, some kneeling, others refusing to believe. The Adeptus Mechanicus would fall into chaos, their faith in the Omnissiah shaken to its core. For the Emperor's return would mean one thing: the false interpretations of 10,000 years laid bare. And in that truth, billions of faithful would either ascend in devotion or perish in despair. The Custodes would be the first to kneel. For 10,000 years they have guarded his still form. Now they would stand before the living embodiment of their purpose. Their golden armor would gleam like the first dawn as they march beside their reborn master. The Space Marines, scattered across the stars, would rally to his call. Entire chapters would abandon their crusades to return to Terra. Legion banners long thought lost would rise again. Yet unity would not come easily. Many chapters, shaped by centuries of isolation and mutation, might question whether this truly is the Emperor or some divine trick of the warp. Brother would face brother in faith and doubt alike. And while humanity trembles, the warp itself would convulse. The Astronomicon's flare would become a storm. Across the Imperium, demons would scream as the light of the Emperor's mind pierced their essence. For 10,000 years, the Emperor's psychic presence has been contained, restrained by the Golden Throne. Freed from that confinement, his consciousness would burn like a star across the warp. The Chaos Gods, those eternal parasites of emotion and corruption, would feel fear. Tzeentch would see his plans unravel. Nurgle's rot would wither before the Emperor's will. Slaanesh would shriek as its temptations falter. Even Khorne, the Lord of War, would roar in furious awe at the return of the only being who ever rivaled his wrath. Reality itself might shatter under the strain. Worlds would flicker as the boundaries between material and immaterial thinned. Psychers would either ascend or burn alive as their souls resonate with his awakening. The warp might grow quiet for a moment, not through peace, but through absolute dominance. For in that instant, the Emperor would not merely be man or god, he would be law. The political aftermath would be catastrophic. The High Lords of Terra, who have ruled for millennia in his name, would be stripped of purpose and power. The imperial bureaucracy, bloated beyond comprehension, would crumble overnight. Systems that once took centuries to function would fall into chaos as the Emperor reshapes the Imperium by will alone. Every decree, every heresy, every betrayal, nothing would remain hidden. The Emperor's psychic gaze would sweep through the souls of mankind, and in it no deceit could survive. And yet he might not bring wrath. What if his millennia of torment have changed him? What if through unending pain and isolation the Emperor has transcended the mortal understanding of power? Perhaps he no longer seeks conquest or empire, but evolution. Perhaps his return would not herald judgment, but renewal. He may no longer see the galaxy as something to rule, but something to heal. In this vision, the Emperor's return would mark the birth of a new age, the age of enlightenment. He would end the cult of his worship, dissolving the chains of superstition that have bound humanity. He would reveal the truth that the gods of chaos exist only because mortals feed them with fear, hatred, and despair. He would teach humanity to master the warp rather than fear it. Psychers would no longer be hunted as abominations, but trained as architects of reality. Technology, long suppressed by ignorance and dogma, would flourish once more. The Adeptus Mechanicus would become scientists again. The Imperium, united under reason and guided by his wisdom, would rise into a civilization of unimaginable power, not through faith, but through understanding. But such transformation would not come without blood. Millions of zealots would refuse to abandon their faith. Planets would rebel, declaring that the being claiming to be the Emperor is a false prophet. Civil wars would ignite across sectors as old beliefs collide with new truth. Chaos, sensing opportunity, would strike from the shadows, twisting humanity's confusion into fresh corruption. Even in rebirth, the Imperium would burn. Beyond humanity, the galaxy would react in awe and fear. The Eldar would see in him an echo of the Old Ones, a being whose will can shape fate itself. Some might even join him, believing his light to be the last hope against chaos. The Necrons, ancient enemies of life, would awaken in greater numbers, perceiving the Emperor as the reincarnation of the hated star gods. The Tyranids, driven by their collective hunger, would turn toward his light like moths to flame, compelled by instinct to consume the greatest psychic beacon the galaxy has ever known. The Tau might seek alliance, hoping to merge their greater good with his divine order, but under his gaze, even their ideals might be found wanting. And what of the warp itself? Could even the Chaos Gods survive his full awakening? Perhaps his return would not destroy them, but change them, their power diminishing as humanity's fear fades, their influence waning as knowledge replaces ignorance. Or perhaps he would ascend beyond both realms, becoming something neither god nor mortal, a being of perfect balance, binding reality and warp into harmony for the first time in history. But the Emperor's greatest battle would not be against Xenos or demons. It would be against his own creation. For humanity has spent 10,000 years defining itself through worship, obedience, and war. Can a species that has known only tyranny accept freedom?
And so the galaxy waits. 10,000 years of silence, 10,000 years of prayer. If the Emperor truly returns, his coming will shake the stars themselves. The Astronomicon would blaze like a divine flame, and even the Chaos Gods would recoil before his wrath. But his return would not be gentle. The Emperor reborn would be no mere man. He would be will made flesh, judgment incarnate.
Every false priest, every corrupt lord, every coward hiding behind his name would be cast into the fire. For some, his light would mean salvation. For others, annihilation. The Imperium would stand on the edge of a new dawn or final ruin. And as his voice echoes once more across the stars, one truth will remain. Mankind must rise or burn trying. This is not the end. It is the beginning of the Age of the Emperor. Before you go, don't forget to subscribe and like the video to support the next great What If in the grim darkness of the far future.